February 24, 1978. 5 men drive into the freezing Sierra Nevada mountains, leaving behind a perfectly functional car and a mystery that would baffle the FBI for decades.
They were the Yuba County Five, best friends, basketball fans, and young men with everything to live for. They had no reason to vanish.
After a big win in Chico, they headed home. But somewhere on the paved road, they took a turn that led them straight into a nightmare.
The car didn't break down. It wasn't stuck. Yet they walked away from it, heading higher into the sub-zero wilderness.
Panic must have set in as the oxygen thinned and the temperatures plummeted. Why did they leave the heater of the Montego?
A lone witness, Joseph Shones, watched from his own car as lights flickered in the woods. He heard whistling and shouting, but he was too terrified to move.
Shones was having a heart attack, stranded just feet away from the men. He watched them walk into the dark, ignoring his cries for help.
They weren't alone, or were they? The tracks they left in the snow suggested a group moving with purpose, even as the blizzard began to howl.
Search parties would later find the car perfectly fine, with plenty of gas and a map. But the boys were nowhere to be found.
Peak intensity, a shocking cliffhanger for the hook. The search would uncover a trailer 20 miles away. Inside, a discovery so gruesome and baffling, it earned the case the American Dyatlov Pass.
To understand the tragedy, we must understand the men. They weren't just a group of friends. They were a brotherhood, bound by their local vocational center, the Gateway Projects.
They lived for basketball. The Gateway Gators were preparing for a major tournament in Sacramento, a highlight of their year that they had practiced for months to win.
Ted Weyer was the heart of the group. Friendly and dependable, he was a man of routine who never missed a day of work or a practice session.
Jack Madruga was the driver. He took immense pride in his 1969 Mercury Montego, a car he kept in pristine condition and rarely let anyone else touch.
Jack Hewitt and Bill Sterling were inseparable. Hewitt was the youngest and most sensitive, often relying on the older men for guidance and support.
Then there was Gary Mathias. A former Army veteran, Gary struggled with schizophrenia, but had been stable for years, thanks to a strict medication regimen.
Their families were tight-knit and protective. The men lived at home, and their parents knew their schedules down to the minute. They weren't risk-takers.
The night of February 24th started like any other. They packed their gear, piled into Madruga's Montego, and drove 50 miles north to Chico to watch a college game.
They were seen cheering in the stands as UC Davis took on Chico State. They were happy, visible, and completely normal. No one saw any sign of trouble.
At 10 p.m., they stopped at Bears Market to buy snacks for the drive home. It was the last time anyone would see the Yuba County Five alive and well.
Leaving the bright lights of Chico behind, the 5 men headed south toward home. But at an unmarked junction, the Mercury Montego veered onto a narrow, unpaved road, climbing into the Plumas National Forest.
Analytical and deeply puzzled by the illogical choice, Jack Madruga was an experienced driver who knew these roads, yet he drove nearly 70 miles in the wrong direction, ascending thousands of feet into a blizzard.
The air grew thin. The temperature dropped to sub-zero. Suddenly, the car stopped on a high mountain ridge, miles from any civilization.
Inside, the men huddled together. There was no heater, no light, and no explanation for why they were there. Panic began to claw at the edges of their minds.
Through the rear view mirror, they saw lights, another car. Joseph Shones was parked nearby, suffering a heart attack, but the men didn't approach him. They just watched.
For reasons only they knew, they decided to leave the safety of the car. They stepped out into the knee-deep snow, leaving the keys in the ignition and the doors unlocked.
They began to walk, not back down the mountain towards safety, but further up into the heart of the freezing wilderness.
The physical toll was immediate. In their thin, light jackets, the mountain air felt like knives against their skin. Jack Hewitt, the youngest, looked back one last time.
Gary Mathias, perhaps relying on his military training, tried to keep them moving, but in the pitch black and the howling wind, direction became an illusion.
The Montego was left behind, a silent tomb in the woods. The 5 men disappeared into the whiteout, embarking on a 20-mile trek that none of them were prepared to survive.
The disappearance sparked one of the largest manhunts in California history. For months, families waited by the phone, clinging to the hope that their sons had simply sought shelter.
When the snow finally cleared in June, the Mercury Montego was found exactly where it had been left. The keys were gone, but the car was in perfect working order.
A group of motorcyclists riding near a remote Forest Service trailer 20 miles away made the discovery that changed everything. A broken window, a smell of decay.
Inside, they found Ted Ware. He was stretched out on a bed, wrapped in 8 thick sheets. His body a skeletal shadow of the man he once was.
But here was the dead. He had survived for nearly 3 months in that trailer. He had lost 100 pounds, slowly starving to death in the frozen silence.
A most baffling part? The trailer was a gold mine of supplies. A locker just feet from Ted's bed contained enough sea rations to feed all 5 men for a year.
There were also tanks of butane and a heater. Ted had never turned them on. He sat in the dark, in the cold, surrounded by the tools of survival he never used.
Outside the trailer, the horror continued. Searchers found the remains of Madruga and Sterling, their bodies ravaged by the elements and wildlife.
Jack Hewitt's remains were found by his own father. Only his backbone and a pair of Levi's remained, scattered near the trailer where Ted had died.
A final, chilling mystery to end the act. But one man was missing, Gary Mathias. His shoes were found inside the trailer, but his body was nowhere to be seen. The veteran had simply vanished into thin air. With the discovery of the bodies, the investigation shifted from a search to a formal coroner's inquest. There were no suspects, no arrests, only a mountain of baffling evidence.
The coroner examined Ted Ware's remains. The verdict was hypothermia and starvation, yet the timeline didn't make sense. How could a man survive 90 days on nothing but snow?
Families gathered in the small hearing room, their faces etched with a mix of grief and fury. They didn't want a medical explanation. They wanted to know who led their sons to their deaths.
The lead investigator, Sergeant John Thompson, faced a wall of dead ends. Every piece of evidence, the car, the trailer, the clothes, only deepened the mystery of their behavior.
The verdict on Gary Mathias was even more elusive. Investigators theorized that without his medication, he may have led the group into a psychotic fog, but there was no proof.
Outside, the media frenzy reached a fever pitch.
Reporters from across the country labeled it the American Dyatlov Pass, demanding answers the police simply didn't have.
The final report was typed out with a sense of defeat. Cause accidental. No foul play suspected. For the families, this was not a verdict. It was a betrayal. Jack Hewitt's father refused to accept the ruling. He sat in the courtroom, staring at the empty chairs where his son's friends should have been, his eyes cold with a silent vow.
The trailer, once a crime scene, was hauled away for further testing. It sat in a police lot, a rusted silver tomb that held the secrets of Ted Wyer's final lonely months.
The case was officially moved to the inactive files. The Yuba County Five were gone. The verdict was recorded, but the mountain still held the only truth.
Decades have passed since the snow melted in 1978. Yet the silence of Gary Mathias remains the ghost in the machine. No bone, no clue. For the families, the closure never came. There left the image of Ted Wyer. Was it a group madness triggered by the altitude? Or did they see something in the dark? The Mercury Montego was eventually towed away and sold. But the mountain ridge where it sat, why did Jack Madruga leave the Keys? Why did they hike 20 miles in the blizzard? The Gateway Gators never played their tournament. Their uniforms were eventually boxed up. Some believe they are still out there. Whispers in the wind that rattles the pines of Yuba County. The final moments of Ted Wyer, scratching marks of the wood as the light faded. The Yuba County Five, 5 friends who went to a basketball game and drove